tonight. Sitting right next to me is Gregg Standridge. He is a working artist and a recipient of the Thrive Grant based in Norman. Then next to Gregg is Leondre Lattimore. He is a working artist as well, and the OKC Arts Public Art Project Manager for Oklahoma City, for the City of Oklahoma City. Sitting next to Leondre, we have Debra Martin-Barber, who is a working artist, as all these panelists are, a Thrive Grant recipient, and a member of the Grants for Artists Selection Committee for Oklahoma City. Next to Debra, we have Morrison Lans, who is a working artist and community application preparedness workshopper from Oklahoma, or from Tulsa, sorry. I was thinking about what a mouthful what I just said was, and then I went for Oklahoma City instead of Tulsa. So, tonight we're going to dive into the realities of artist applications and pay models. Our goal is to have a candid, community-driven conversation that highlights both the challenges and the opportunities within our current system. So we're going to explore barriers, we're going to explore current standards, if there are any, equitable practices, and innovative models for fair compensation. All right. Are you guys ready to dive in?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let's do this. So kicking it off with barriers and motivations. We want to start by discussing the barriers. I think my first question, and I think we'll kind of do this just popcorn, if one of you feels the spirit, so to speak, please raise your hand, or whoever wants to go first, and then, we'll keep it moving, but I want to know who has what to say, so we'll make sure to do it that way. Did you have something? Oh, okay, I saw your hand go up, so I'm not sure. Okay, so what are some of the initial challenges that artists in Oklahoma face when they try to break into the industry? And this could be referring to applications specifically, this could be equity-based, this could be, what are some barriers? Just throwing out some barriers that you know in Oklahoma. Pass it, my friends, we're gonna be doing that. Thank you.
So I think initial barriers would be knowing where to begin looking, for one thing. There's not really cohesive databases. There are a few, but they're not readily available, they're not obvious. It takes a lot of personal effort to find resources that just list what is available, where it's available, and who it's available to. So that would be one of the biggest challenges, I think, starting out, is just even knowing where to start looking.
Absolutely.
I think another barrier, I think even about like my own experience, when you first start out as an artist, really finding spaces that are open to artists who may not have the most experience. I think that's a very strong barrier, especially maybe when you're trying to get into like a gallery, or if you're trying to apply for an art school. A lot of times the amount of experience can be intimidating depending on how much you have, and that can serve as a very strong barrier.
I think, in my experience, one of the barriers is just finding buyers to buy your work. Sometimes people think that it's obvious that the buyers are in galleries or art museums, but they can be in coffee shops and other places like that that I have learned to venture out into other spaces besides the obvious. And so just finding the buyers either online, word of mouth, really helps, but it can be a barrier sometimes, because even that can be, finding a buyer can be a seasonal thing.
One of the things that I think really hangs people up a lot of times is fear of being rejected for it. Self-talk about, well, I'm not going to do anything out there anyway, because I don't want to go to art, I'm going to fail, kind of thing. But I think the biggest thing is trying to make yourself do one thing if you have to. Just one thing. I'm going to do this one art market. Okay, I'm going to go to the side of the Friday, second Friday art market and try to set up. And just you have to work your way through all that, and just doing one thing at a time and keep it up every is great.
Can I add to that, please? So I think that's a great observation, breaking it down into a consumable or less like overwhelming piece. And one of the things that ended up working really well for me when I started fiendishly applying to things a few years ago was to respect like the person that I was that day. Some days I wanted to be working in studios, and some days studio work was not particularly flowing, and so that would be a day I would give myself permission to like lay on the couch with the laptop like right here, and the bag of potato chips behind it, and like scroll for opportunities or work on an opportunity. Like, that would be a day for updating my statement or making the proposal for like why I should go to a residency. But like finding when you have the tolerance for those sorts of jobs and carving out the time for them and starting to notice that about yourself, I think it's a really advantageous strategy for artists. You don't have to do the entire application in one day. The earlier you start, the earlier you can go, like, today I don't want to think, so I'm just going to like upload images. Today I need to think, so I'm going to work on the writing part of it. I think those aspects can make it less intimidating if you learn how to break it down into consumable little chunks.
I think that makes me think, we're talking about applications, right? Money is a big barrier, right? Being able to afford to do application fees, for example. If you apply for 10 applications and they all have $25 application fees, that adds up really quickly. So a lot of times, so application fees can even be more than that, right? It can go based on the number of images you submit. That type of thing. Those can definitely create barriers.
I want to add on to that. So here are some numbers for you from my own experiences. So back in, I think it was about October of 2020, I decided I was going to start applying to anything that was potentially a fit. I was trying to expand my practice outside of my region. I was trying to get more exposure on all sorts of levels, so I started applying to just absolutely everything I could. So since then till now, I applied to 145 different calls. 43 of those did not have a fee. 102 of those did have a fee. The average fee was the median was about $30. The most expensive one I applied for was a residency in Hawaii, and the application was $160. The cheapest one that still had a fee was $5. Sometimes there are really great applications that have no fee, and there should be more of those, but it's really crazy because I don't think there's any other industry where you have to pay basically to submit a job application essentially, and it's really ridiculous. So anyway, thinking about that and how it all adds up, I personally, through all of those calls, have spent $3,336 just on application fees over the last 4 years.
Adding to that, yes, when you apply for these for the applications to show your work or to residencies, and you don't get accepted, it's kind of disappointing because you think, I spent all this money applying, can I get a refund? Because I didn't get accepted or partial, but there's no mechanism for that I know of, but it would be helpful because you do spend a lot of money on application fees and residency fees, and sometimes they want you to register. I've even had applied for residencies where they want you to register first, which is odd, but that was out of state residency, so different guidelines.
I experienced Becky and I experienced this where we had a nice bankroll going in the beginning of the year, but then we had to go through and do all the applications and fees and all that. And by the time Martha around, we're like, eating grocery sandwiches. So yeah, it's you kind of find ahead for it. But I think it's just so important that even if you fail at it, or don't get that application, you go out and improve and learn. That's how you learn how to do this, is by doing this.
Just with that on barriers, are these, and JP, given your experience too with all of that, are these barriers unique to our state, or do they reflect broader trends in the art world? Or is Oklahoma just kind of sometimes last to change our application system or have a fee situation or RFQs, that sort of thing?
I would honestly say that our recommendations are a little bit ahead of the curve. OVAC doesn't tend to have a fee for things. I don't think the Tulsa Arts Fellowship has a fee. And most of the things that I apply for in the state are fairly equitable. I would say it's a national issue. Most of these calls are calls all over the world that I'm looking at, and typically you're paying $25 for anything you're applying for, yeah. And on top of that, I would say that the game that we're in now is that if you are spending this money on your job applications, you then need to look for grant applications to afford your job applications. And I was very fortunate to receive an OVAC grant to help cover some of these costs. And so, in that way, again, I feel like we're actually ahead of the curve slightly. Oklahoma has a very unique, communicative, creative community, and I honestly feel like when we put our heads together, we've been able to pull off some really amazing things in our community. It's part of the reason I'm staying here.
I kind of, you guys, unless you have anything to add, we can kind of take this into motivations. And, Oklahoma has a really diverse community of artists, creative community. What drives individuals from different backgrounds, different communities to create art? And how do those motivations really shape the kind of work that is getting produced in Oklahoma? And kind of what we're seeing, is this a living, breathing organism that we're all seeing shaped in real time? And I would love to hear what you all think about how that's reflected.
When they're creating, so for historical reasons, and also for recording this. So it's very important. It's motivator.
I love to do what I want to do. I love to make what I want to make. But I have to diversify myself and make things that people can afford, and that's just the way it is. But on the other hand, I'm very fortunate as a member of the Choctaw Nation. They would seek out Choctaw artists specifically for that, and making things that relate to my tribe. It's a great honor, and it's a great experience to be able to learn to do that and learn more about the culture that for this specific work.
We'll keep moving along here. I love that. Somebody will know who said this, but I'm terrible with names. But the role of the artist is to make the revolution look irresistible. Is that? I'm bad with names. But that's what you made me think of, right? We're reflecting the times, and I think that is part of the power of an artist that does choose to stay in Oklahoma. So, what are, in your experience, the current standards? And we kind of giggled about this on our Zoom call when we kind of got to discuss these topics and get to know each other a little bit about. Are there current standards, right? Is there a standard that every artist knows about, or is it a very wavy, kind of ambiguous thing that we can't really, an intangible thing? Are there current standards and applications, or at least some themes that we can talk about in Oklahoma specifically?
No, there are standards. There are no standards. There is not a system of criteria that is listed consistently anywhere. The amount of time I've used trying to find out a fit for a call is aggravating. For example, you guys promoted the Camargo Foundation. They have a residency. I was on one of the OVAC stories recently, and I went and looked at it. And for me personally, I'm always looking for residencies where I can bring my family and my 7-year-old child. So it was a pretty well-organized website, and it had a 15-page, proposal perspective. It took me 6 minutes to find out whether I could have a family there, and it's on the 10th page, which is a 15-page document. And I think I would have taken longer if I hadn't done this so many times that I started to know what to look for. I highly recommend knowing how to do a keyword search on a web page if you're doing this, so you can type in the thing that you need to know. Specifically in Oklahoma, I have not experienced standardization of calls. There's not a ton of calls going out necessarily, but I do see organizations like OVAC and the Mid-American Arts Alliance, they compile a lot of calls in a consistent manner that lists sort of criteria in their newsletters, and that's always been incredibly helpful. I think that's a really excellent service that public funded organizations can provide to our community, is that condensing into a more cohesive database. Something else I was going to say.
Applications. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing digging through the applications just for shows. They're so diverse and odd. You just have to dig through each one of them to find everything that you want to do. My medium is such a weird medium anyways. It's marketing, wood marketing, and there's, I'm always calling the people up, hey, what do you think I should be in this? And that's, one time it's diverse art, one time it's 2D, one time it's wood. It's just, they're, you just can't tell about what it is. But you do have to dig through those applications and really here's another thing that's driving me nuts. Okay, sorry. I would love to know if a festival is going to be on cement or on ground, so I know what they're bringing in for the thing. It's just you don't want you to know.
What my experience with the applications is that it's really hard sometimes to find common, consistent language to use because they are so different and so inconsistent that it would be nice to have a form of text where we could, understand what words they're looking for, what ideas that they want from you, things. And so, to me, some of the applications are very opaque. But I've always had really good luck with OVAC applications because they are very clear-cut and pretty consistent. So, but compared to applying for shows and residencies, they're all over the place. And you could have one application that asks for a description of your work and the other one doesn't. And it's like, okay, I thought you were a residency, don't you want to know what your work is? And then the word counts can be so crazy. Like one application, they had a word count limit of 500 words, and the other one wants 1,500 words. I'm like, okay, so I can probably build on that, but it might be exhausting.
No, keep going, yeah.
I really agree with a lot of what's been said. It can be really frustrating when you're applying to different applications and they're all looking for different things. And someone compared it to an actual, when you're doing resumes or job applications, that's similar to what it's like when you're kind of always having to retailor, sort of what what you're saying really, what you're presenting to me, even though your work is exactly the same.
Right.
You may have to, market it or sort of sell it in a different way to different people, even when maybe a show is being, accepting calls and it might have a theme and the theme might be one word and they may not give any other explanation to what the theme is, so you sit there and wonder, does my work, align with what they're seeking, that sort of thing. And I think that's, really important for arts organizations to also be able to give feedback to those kind of things. I think being accessible to be able to answer those kind of questions from artists is really important because artists they always have those questions. As an artist myself and someone who works for the city, those questions are important to answer. So
So regarding that, that's one of the things that makes me the most insane is like when it's like, oh, this application needs to be 1,000 pixels wide, and this one has to be 1,500 pixels wide, and this, like, we could consistently like make a file type that everyone agrees on would be lovely, because I spend so much time resizing images. And I try and keep duplicates. I have a small, medium, large, so hopefully I don't have to resize every single time. I have a 3-page resume, I have a 1-page resume, I have a 5-page resume, I have a 500-word statement, I have a 150-word statement, and I copy and paste. I either work in Google Docs and just keeping a bunch of this stuff, because you just end up having all this do-over busy work otherwise. And because every single call has these minute subtle differences that make you have to do this different dance. And then you have to pay.
On that, as far as fair pay, many artists encounter opportunities that don't offer fair pay. How have you handled these experiences in the past? Have you, brought up or recognized an underpaid opportunity to the organization ever in those instances? We'll start with that.
I'll start since I've already commented on my almost no opportunities paid appropriately. I've had one opportunity that came close, I would say, but I still was very much struggling to get everyone who I was paying for that project paid. And then, so there's, that also is a very broad question. Like, are we talking about an installation or a show, or like what are we being paid for? How are we being paid? Is the gallery earning their 50% cut? What do they do to earn that 50% cut? And it's so hard for us as artists to actually ask for what we're worth. We're so desperate for the opportunity, and there's so many of us vying for it, that once you're actually finally in that seat, like, it's really hard for us to say what we are worth, because we never get actually acknowledged for what we're worth. I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about the organization where you guys do your honorariums and stuff on that level, because I think that's actually like a great starting point for where we need to be going.
Yes, absolutely. So at the city or home city, just to sort of briefly describe our process, is similar to this process. But of course, when we receive our applications and submissions from artists, we go through a preliminary process with our selection committees, which we narrow them down to maybe 3 to 5 finalists depending on the type of project and how big of a project it is. But for every single project that we do, doesn't matter how big or small it is, our finalists always receive honorariums for creating their proposals. And that's something I feel very strongly about even as an artist, so I'm glad that I'm working for an organization that does that, otherwise I would probably be asking questions. Because I agree that that's important, and understanding how much work goes into creating a proposal and preparing for a presentation. Of course, you have to mentally prepare yourself to sell yourself to a committee, right? And also prepare yourself for the rejection, those kinds of things. That's a lot of work, physically and mentally, and being compensated for that is so important, because again, there's so many ways in which artists can be underpaid or really not given what they deserve. So I think that it's super important to do that.
But I also know that sometimes it's a give and take thing. Sometimes I make something or create something for somebody that I'm not making any money on it, But sometimes that leads to something that makes some really good money for me. So it's a little bit of ebb and flow there. So it's a lot of it is just kind of making a good judgment, or trying to make the best judgment you can, I should say, and say, well, is this maybe something that's going to lead into something better for me? And sometimes I'm just hungry, I'm just going to sell it for it right after.
Sure.
Sometimes that can be really difficult too, honestly, trying to decide how important exposure is maybe in a certain space versus actually selling your work. You mentioned earlier how some galleries may request 50% of your work when you sell it, right? And of course, for the most part, artists have to consider that when they list their price. It's not, most of the times they may just increase the price for their artwork. But that can be really frustrating if you know that with a gallery that maybe doesn't have a strong group of collectors, for example. They can be very difficult. So a lot of times maybe just relying on the exposure from a certain opportunity versus actually receiving like the monetary compensation, that's still important because, we're relying on our career as artists to feed ourselves, take care of ourselves, our family. So it's about more than just exposure, That's a big thing for artists, of course, exposure is great, but, we need money, right?
Just to add to that, one of the experiences that I had is that when I had an opportunity to show my work at a gallery, and the commission was a little bit higher than I wanted, but I again was desperate to want to be seen. So at some point, I built up enough confidence to ask the gallery owner if my clients could buy my work directly from me. And I was surprised that she said yes. So don't be afraid to step out of the box, because I ended up selling a piece and got all the money.
I get a lot of work doing commissions for gift shops where I make pieces, and I sell them wholesale. And I get my prices out of when I'm making them all at once. It's a lot easier to do instead of want to make this piece and I'm going to make myself to make this piece. And so I have that downward. It's very effective for me. Also, too, it doesn't matter. This is terrible. I'm just going to speak honestly here. It doesn't matter how poorly I do in an art market or a festival and all that. I'm always making more money than I did as a musician, and that's true.
You gotta kind of, figure out where you wanna land, and if that's working for you, then that's good. We talked about what that impact is on our artistic community, on you all as artists, on the motivation to make art, how money is a hindrance for making art, to live and to especially to do that in Oklahoma. And so with that current landscape, I think we're all in a prime place, even everyone in this room, to mold what the future looks like, right? And a lot of what Oklahoma institutions, even though it sounds like we're doing really great, and I'm excited about that. But I think that it's exciting to see where we're going and how artists are going to shape, the institutions, right? And asking for what we need, and taking breaks when we need it, or throwing a free piece to a friend for some exposure, or, knowing where our energy can be used when we have capacity to do so, and how we can influence change in those standards. And so what can we collectively push for as far as better pay, as far as more equitable opportunities? You've spoke on some ways we've done that. Are there other ways as far as, social media, as far as using our own networks, other inspiring, awesome stories that you guys have?
I would say don't be afraid to hold organizations accountable. Feedback is very important. As someone who works for a public organization, I value the feedback that we give, whether it's that we receive, whether it's good or bad. And I think that organizations, if they don't take that type of thing seriously, then that may not be the type of organization that you want to be associated with anyways, because of course, at the end of the day, it's about the artists, and that's what we're here to do, is to enhance, artistry and, artists in their careers. So I think if you have, an experience with an organization and you want to tell them about it, please do. Definitely let them know how you feel. And, you may be surprised, the changes that could come, behind that. Sometimes organizations may have just a handful of people that are making decisions, so it can be a lot of perspectives that they haven't considered. We talked about diversity being important. Well, there's a lot of arts organizations that don't have that. So being able to give that perspective to them, I think is definitely necessary to make sure we continue to advance that part of the art world.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about write the email, tell them what didn't work, or tell them what did work. think an organization that actually gives feedback on applications. Those are incredibly rare. It takes a ton of work. You know, I was just talking to the OVAC crew here, and I think there's like 4 of you in the room, and that's the 4 of you that are doing this entire thing. And that's an incredible amount of work. And then on top of that, to then provide feedback and help and have a conversation, you know, they're all man hours, and that's part of what these application fees are supposed to go to, is those man hours. Another thing to look for is the organization putting your application fee towards their man hours? Are they honest about where that money goes? They aren't, asked. And then I think the best thing that we can do right now here at this beginning of us trying to make this a more equitable and fair and hopefully a paid experience for artists at some point is to share with each other what organizations are doing things right and promote things that are good and promote opportunities that we see that are quality to other artists and not gatekeep from each other, because really the best thing that we can do to help each other's careers grow is to help each other's careers grow. And it can be scary when you feel that scarcity of opportunities to share them with other people, but I think that really we have more, we're the resource. We're the resource for the organizations, we're the resource for the residency. We need the artists to show up and make the work. We need the artists to speak about how that experience has affected them positively. We have a lot of power that we don't necessarily realize, especially as a collective. If we share that with each other and build from there, I think we could start to create better accountability for where the resources, our time, our money are going.
It's really, you pretty much answered the next question about equitable practices in Oklahoma. So if anyone wants to add on kind of, you know, what institutions are doing it right, we've seen positive examples, OVAC, I'll throw out Sunny Days and brag on there, how much, you know, they're able to pay artists per square foot, OKC Arts honorarium, etc. Are there other practices that we need to know about that exist that these artists can be advocating for, looking for as well when they're applying, to know what's available, right? Sometimes we don't know how to champion ourselves because we don't even know that we can do that in some ways. So we've already talked about that.
I think another thing this makes me think about, you mentioned, you know, the importance of community amongst other artists is, you know, if you're interested in an organization or a gallery, if you do like research and learn about the other artists that are maybe featured in that gallery, maybe reaching out to them and asking them maybe for advice or what their experience is being inside that gallery, I think you give a lot of insight sometimes, whether it's good or bad. You know, maybe they'll tell you, you know, I had to tweak my application this way, and this is what worked for me. Maybe you can do that, or they can say, this experience was horrible for me and I would not recommend it to anyone else, and now it'll let you know ahead of time that maybe that's not the place you want to seek out. And so I think that's important to really like that work with other artists. I think that's important to use network. It's definitely important.
I just want to repeat what you guys said. It's so important to talk to everybody, the artists that you know, Becky and I had so much experience. We were 4 years ago getting into this totally right. As far as, you know, trying to do art for a living. And everybody that I've talked to, this has been so kind. And I've not met the gatekeeper yet. I'm so glad I have.
Well, I'm just going to piggyback on what everybody else said. It is important to network, and it's important to listen and observe what other artists are doing and the paths that they've taken, because it's just vital to stay cohesive and together as a community, and then build on each other's strengths and learn what's out there in the community as far as applying for art grants and for applications for shows and residencies, the do's and don'ts.
That kind of leads us into the importance of equity and the new models, right? And as you mentioned, Debra, you know, a lot of the art that's being created is reflected based on what's happening in our state. And I personally, my belief is that, that's our job to do that, right? And that when we tell stories through art, lives are changed and opinions are changed and things can magically happen in that sweet spot. So I think that leads me to why it's crucial to address the inequities, right? And why we need artists to be paid everywhere, but especially in a state like Oklahoma where we need art and we need art advocates and we need energy for that. And in order to have energy for art, we need living wages for our artists. And so those application processes, all of those things that take time, that improves lives. So what, as far as ensuring fairness in these areas of the quality of life, not just for artists, but really I want you to speak to the broader community in Oklahoma.
I'm very proud of what Oklahoma does that way, that we have these networks of communication. One of the things I really love about being here is the fact that I feel like I can go up and talk to the president of an organization or the director of a museum. There's not as much of a backlog of people trying to get to a spot. We have room to move here and we have room to make differences, and you can see how that's happened even in the last 10 years. So yeah, I don't know if that speaks to where we're going, but it's where we've been.
To add to that, when I moved to Oklahoma with my family in the 60s, we had lived in Ohio, so there's a lot of art in that area of the country. And so when we came down here, we kind of realized it was a little dry. But over the years, I've seen the growth, and I've seen art being produced through murals and historical events. And so it's very encouraging for the community to grow in that aspect, so that the stories get to be told and that we get to share our humanity together.
I just want to comment as an art lover and as a kid, things that I saw as a kid that influenced me so hard to do art and music in general. We took a trip to the Capitol Hall of Fame in my 5th grade, on the school bus and all that.
Voicing what you're voicing today and letting us hear it, and I hope this is a continuous conversation, and then we can push back and say, hey, this is what artists need, this is what the community needs. So it's very empowering, and I think I absolutely agree about us all being together. And I also want to mention, we do on our new website have a forum. So if that feels like a space to have this conversation about, hey, this residency is doing a good job. This is an A, this is a B, this is a C, D, F, whatever, however that looks. We have space to hold that conversation. And remember.
In our
forum
yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's for OVAC members, so we have a membership program where artists pay $45 a year, and we try to just give them as many resources as possible with that $45. And one of those is having that secluded forum where the artists can, as a coalition, talk. And so if anyone's interested in OVAC membership and wants to learn more, feel free to come talk to me, or we have lots of stuff, or you can reach out to us later to learn about.
That's also like password protected. It's not like,
Yeah, everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to, I would think, a closed, kind of somewhat private space to have a conversation, perhaps. So, throwing that out there.
I think Lumen had a question
Yes.
as well.
It was that question. I wanted to know what I was thinking.
Oh.
Also, I'm a big art youth advocacy person. That's my jam, is getting art to the youth. So starting a new outreach program in North Public Schools at Firehouse. That's my whole job right now. There's also other high school programs that are pretty rad. There's Art Space at Title has a whole mentorship program in printmaking. And then the other one was, it's gone. But we have a class here in the teen youth art.
Yeah.
Teen Arts Council.
Yeah, we have one at Arts Council in the city, we also have one at Home Contemporary.
Yes. Well, it's one and they shift around, right?
No, we're two
Two different things?
two separate programs, so we pretty much do the same thing.
Amazing.
So we'll take high school kids, usually it's a semester for us, probably same for contemporary, just because of location. We've had kids from Tulsa, if they want to do the drama, they're more than welcome to. But we take them to different places, so we take them to other cities, we take them to contemporary. I'm trying to find a holiday theater performance for them to go to in December, but just giving those kids those outlets to visually see what other people are doing in different mediums or what works, how people collaborate. So yeah, our applications are open at our website, so you can do that. Festival of the Arts 2025, those applications are also at our website for visual arts, performing, and food vendors. So you know someone that's in our way. We also have an emerging artist program, so if you've never done an arts festival before, but you want to, we will create a mentor for the first year. You learn how to load your band, how to price your artwork, how to make your artwork look great in the booth so people will stop and look at it, talk to you, maybe make a sale. The second year, you're going to do this big giant tent where you can sell your